At 82, my daughter-in-law took away my pension card and gave me $3 a day for food, saying, "An old man doesn't need more." I endured it silently until one day, a registered letter arrived from the United States about the inheritance of my immigrant brother. My name is Miguel Fernandez, and if someone had told me a year ago that at 82 I would be begging for handouts in my own home, I would have laughed. But life, as it turns out, knows how to give lessons that not even a nightmare could imagine. It all began 3 years ago, when my only son Andres died in a car accident. He was only 52, an age when life is just beginning to settle into a calm rhythm, when one can start thinking about grandchildren and how to pass accumulated experience to the next generation. But fate decided otherwise. Andres was a good son. After my wife Carmen died 5 years ago, he regularly visited me, helped with shopping, drove me to the doctors. My wife and I had raised him properly. He knew what respect for elders and family values meant. His wife Isabel also seemed like a decent woman. They had been married 20 years. Sadly, they had no children. It just never worked out, though they tried for a long time. After Andre's funeral, I was left completely alone in our 3-room house in the city center. I had bought this house in my youth, after 40 years of work as a turner at the local factory. A good old-style house with spacious rooms and thick walls. Once it had been full of people and joy, my wife busy with household chores, my son and daughter-in-law coming for Sunday lunches, neighbors gathering together. Now the rooms yawned with emptiness, and the echo of my footsteps bounced off the walls. Isabel did not appear during the first weeks after the funeral. I understood. Everyone needs time to grieve. But after a month she came, not with condolences, not to share memories of Andres, but with a very specific proposal. "Miguel," she said, settling herself in the kitchen and pouring coffee without being invited, "I have nowhere to go. Andres rented our apartment, and the contract was in his name. The landlady already demands that I move out, and I have no money. I was a housewife. Andres didn't want me to work." She sat in front of me, a 45-year-old woman, still quite attractive, but with a calculating look on her face. There were no tears in her eyes, though she had buried her husband only a month before. "What are you suggesting?" I asked, though I already suspected. "Let me move in with you. After all, we're family. I'm your son's widow. I'll take care of you, cook, clean, and you'll give me a roof over my head." The proposal seemed reasonable. The house was indeed lonely and dreary. I thought that a woman's presence would revive the atmosphere, that it would be easier for us to endure the loss of Andres together. Besides, at my age, help around the house was welcome. My health was failing. Arthritis tormented my joints. My blood pressure was unstable. "All right," I said, "move in." She smiled, and that smile seemed strangely cold to me. But I brushed off the feeling. Grief changes people, I thought. Isabel moved in a week later. She brought 2 suitcases of belongings and took the room that had once been Andres's. For the first few months, things went well. She really did cook, clean, go shopping. I was even grateful. The house came alive again. The smells of home-cooked meals returned. Someone turned on the television in the evenings. My pension was $550. Not a bad sum for a retiree. Plus veteran benefits, compensation for medicine. In general, one could live quite decently. When Isabel offered to take care of the family budget, it seemed logical. "Miguel," she said one evening at dinner, "let me handle all the finances. It's hard for you to go to the bank, stand in lines, check receipts at the store. I'm younger, full of energy. It's easier for me to do it all." I thought it over and agreed. I gave her my pension card and told her the PIN. At the time, it seemed like the right decision. Why should an old man struggle with bank errands when there's someone to take care of it? For the first 6 months, Isabel really did manage the household conscientiously. She used to buy quality groceries, pay the utility bills, get my medicine when I ran out. I even bragged to the neighbors about how caring my daughter-in-law was. "You're lucky, Miguel," my neighbor Carlos would say. "Not every younger woman would agree to take care of an old man." "Yes," I would answer proudly. "Isabel is golden. She does everything for me." But gradually I began to notice changes. At first, small ones. The groceries became simpler, cheaper. Instead of proper meat, sausages of dubious quality. Instead of good salami, some gray mass in a casing. Milk was replaced with a cheaper one, with a shorter shelf life. When I cautiously asked about it, Isabel explained it by the economic crisis and rising prices. Miguel, you can't imagine how expensive everything has gotten, she said with a worried look. In just half a year, prices have gone up 1.5 times. We have to economize, otherwise the money won't be enough. I believed her. After all, the TV was constantly talking about price hikes and inflation. She must be right, I thought. Then my favorite candies with coffee disappeared. After that, no more fruit. First the expensive ones, then even the cheap ones. Fish was replaced with the simplest kind, frozen, headless. But I kept silent, thinking my daughter-in-law understood the economic situation better than I did. The turning point was my 80th birthday. I expected Isabel to at least prepare something, bake a cake, invite the neighbors, buy a bottle of wine. After all, it was a milestone, a life's landmark. But the day passed absolutely as usual. Porridge for breakfast, soup from a bouillon cube for lunch, rice for dinner. In the evening, I couldn't stand it anymore. Isabel, maybe we could celebrate my birthday after all, even modestly. She looked at me with genuine surprise. Miguel, what kind of celebrations can there be nowadays? Waste money? It's better to save it for medicine or a rainy day. But 80 years, I tried to object. Exactly. At your age, every cent should be spent wisely. Parties are for the young. That was the first time I felt a stab in my heart. Not physical, moral. Was I really so unimportant to her that even my birthday wasn't worth celebrating? But that was only the beginning. After my birthday, my relationship with Isabel began to change gradually. She asked my opinion about purchases less and less and made decisions more and more on her own. When I tried to suggest or object to something, she replied with mild irritation, Miguel, you entrusted me with running the household. That's what I'm doing. If you doubt my competence, then maybe you should handle everything yourself. But I knew I couldn't. Age was taking its toll. My legs didn't obey me well. I was short of breath climbing the stairs. My memory sometimes failed. Besides, I had grown unused to household matters. For the past 5 years after my wife's death, Andres had helped me a lot with everyday issues. Isabel understood this perfectly well and gradually used my helplessness to her advantage. At first, it showed in small things. For example, she might buy herself an expensive face cream, explaining it as necessary to maintain her appearance while looking for work. Or she would purchase a new blouse because the old clothes weren't suitable for job interviews. Meanwhile, my needs were cut back more and more. First, my favorite cookies with coffee disappeared, replaced by the cheapest crackers. Then normal socks and underwear stopped being bought. Isabel said, "At your age, appearance doesn't matter anymore." "Miguel," she would say in a didactic tone, "why do you need quality clothing? You don't go anywhere anyway. You just sit at home. It's better to spend the money on more important things." And yet she bought herself expensive French perfume, explaining it as a psychological necessity to feel like a woman in hard times. I began to realize something was wrong with me, but I couldn't resist it. In literature, this is called gaslighting, a psychological manipulation that makes the victim doubt their own sanity. Only back then I didn't know the term. I just felt I was losing control of my own life. The decisive moment came the day I decided to go to the bank myself and check the state of my account. This was about 1.5 years after Isabel had moved in. I deliberately chose a time when she was busy, out on errands, as she said. At the bank, I was in for a shock. My pension account held only $15, and yet my pension was being deposited regularly every month. $550 monthly, and only $15 left on the account. "Tell me," I asked the bank clerk, "could you print me a statement for the past 6 months?" The statement stunned me. Each month the pension came in, and within a day or two, almost the entire sum was withdrawn. According to the statement, I was spending $520 to $530 per month. But on what? On the meager groceries that appeared in the house? On utilities, which amounted to a maximum of $70? The numbers didn't add up. At home, I cautiously tried to speak to Isabel about it. "Isabel," I began at dinner, "could you tell me what my money is being spent on?" I'd just like to know the structure of our expenses. Her face instantly grew wary. What happened? You entrusted me with managing the budget. I did, but I want to understand where the funds go. Miguel, she flared up. Don't you trust me? I do everything here for you. I carry the whole household on my shoulders, and now you want to control me? Maybe you think I'm stealing your money? Such a reaction unsettled me. Perhaps I really was wrong. Maybe prices had risen so much that $550 barely covered two people? No, no, I hurried to reassure her. That's not what I meant. I just wanted to understand. Understand what? She snapped. You want to understand? Fine, let's break it down. Utilities, $70. Groceries, $170, and that's cutting corners on everything. Medicine, $100 a month, the bare minimum. Household expenses, $50. That's already more than $390. The rest we save for a rainy day for a serious illness. The figures sounded plausible, but something still didn't add up. Groceries for $170 a month? Judging by what was on the table, that was clearly an exaggeration. But I didn't dare argue. I see, I said. Forgive me for doubting. There you see, she softened. You shouldn't have even asked. I'm not your enemy. I do everything for your own good. That was the last time I tried to clarify anything about finances. Isabel made it clear such questions were unwelcome, and I, at 80 years old, no longer had the strength for conflicts. Meanwhile, her lifestyle continued to improve. New curtains appeared in the house, expensive, beautiful ones. Then a new TV in her room, then costly cosmetics in the bathroom. To my timid questions, she answered that these were necessary investments in job hunting or gifts from friends. And my own life became increasingly ascetic. The last small pleasures disappeared. Newspapers I loved to read in the mornings were replaced by free advertising flyers. Coffee was brewed a second time from the same grounds. Meat appeared on the table less and less often. But all that was nothing compared to what happened next. The day that turned my life upside down came exactly a year ago. I remember it in the smallest details, as if it were yesterday. October 15th, Thursday. In the morning it rained, then the sun came out. I was sitting in the kitchen, drinking coffee with crackers, the only sweets still left in the house. Isabel came into the kitchen and sat down opposite me. On her face was a determined expression, the kind people wear when they've made an important decision. She silently looked at me for a few seconds, then spoke. Miguel, we need to have a serious talk. I set aside my cup and looked at her attentively. Something in her tone was alarming. I'm listening, I said. You see, she began, folding her hands on the table, I'm tired of this uncertainty. Every year you become more helpless. It's harder for you to take care of yourself. And I spend my whole life on you, caring, cooking, cleaning, going to shops and pharmacies. Isabel, I'm grateful to you for, I started. No, let me finish, she cut me off sharply. I need guarantees. I can't go on living in such uncertainty, not knowing what tomorrow will bring. What if something happens to you? What if you fall ill and end up in the hospital? Am I supposed to end up on the street then? I stayed silent, sensing trouble. That's why I've made a decision, she continued. I will keep your card with me forever. I will fully control all expenses, and I'll give you pocket money. As much as you need, I'll provide. How much? I asked quietly, feeling a cold chill inside. $3 a day, she said firmly, for food and small personal needs. Believe me, an old man doesn't need more. You have a roof over your head, clothes, I cook the main meals, I clean, I do the laundry. What else could you possibly want at your age? $3 a day. I quickly did the math. That's $90 a month. My pension was $550. Where did the other $460 go? And if I need to see a doctor, I asked, or buy medicine? You'll come to me. I'll decide whether it's truly necessary or if home remedies will do. Miguel, you must understand. I'm doing all this only for your own good. Money in the hands of an old person is evil. You might waste it on useless things, fall for a scam, or simply lose it. And then what? You'd be left with nothing to live on, that's all. Her logic was absurd, but I felt cornered. At 80, a person grows tired of fighting. especially when aware of his own physical helplessness. And one more condition, Isabel added, looking me straight in the eye. Not a word to anyone about our arrangement. Not to the neighbors, not to acquaintances, and especially not to social services or any authorities. Believe me, it will only end worse for you. They might declare you legally incompetent and send you to a nursing home. And there, you won't get any pocket money at all. Just a bed and 3 meals a day. These words finally broke my will. I feared nursing homes more than death. I had heard terrifying stories from acquaintances about what went on there. Indifferent staff, filth, theft, abuse of the elderly. Better $3 a day than total powerlessness in a nursing home. All right, I whispered. I agree. Isabel smiled, satisfied like a cat that had caught a mouse. Excellent. You'll see. This will be better for everyone. You won't have to worry about financial matters, and I'll be able to provide us with a decent life. From that day on, my life turned into hell. Every morning, like alms, Isabel would give me $3, sometimes as a bill, sometimes in change, whatever she had on hand. And she would always add something like, "Here's your allowance for today, Grandpa. Just don't waste it on nonsense." I hated that word, Grandpa. Before Andres' death, she had always called me by name. Now I was just an old man to her, a living object requiring minimal care. $3 a day. That's a beggar's existence, even by the most modest standards. A decent loaf of bread cost $1, a liter of milk, $1.50, a dozen eggs, $2. That meant even the most basic groceries were utterly out of reach. I quickly learned to survive. I bought only discounted bread, the kind baked 2 days ago and already drying out. I took milk close to its expiration date, which was cheaper. Sometimes I allowed myself a pack of pasta or a few sausages, but then I had to spend 2 days eating only bread and water. The most humiliating part was that Isabel cooked separately for herself. In the evenings, wonderful smells would drift from the kitchen. She fried cutlets, cooked soup with good meat, prepared elaborate salads. And for me, the pitiful leftovers, and not always. "Miguel," she would say, putting in front of me a small bowl with 3 spoonfuls of porridge, "here's your dinner. At your age, overeating is very harmful. Better less, but better quality." But there was no better quality at all. I began to lose weight rapidly. My clothes hung on me like on a hanger. In the mirror, a haggard old man stared back. Hollow cheeks, lifeless eyes. But there was no one to complain to. Isabel had made it perfectly clear that any attempt to tell someone about our arrangement would end in the nursing home. The neighbors, it's true, sometimes asked how I was doing, but I was afraid to answer honestly. What if they really reported it somewhere? What if I was declared incompetent? At 80, the prospect of ending up homeless was terrifying. "Everything's fine," I would answer when asked. "Isabel takes wonderful care of me." And inside, I was dying of shame for that lie. The hardest part was medicine. I had serious health problems: hypertension, ischemic heart disease, osteoarthritis. The medications were expensive, and I needed to take them constantly. But with $3 a day, it was impossible to buy even 1 pack of pills. When the medicine ran out, I had to beg Isabel for help. That was the most humiliating part of my existence. "Isabel," I would say, standing before her like a supplicant, "I've run out of blood pressure tablets. Could you buy some?" She would look at me with barely concealed irritation. "Miguel, are you sure you took them correctly? Didn't you exceed the dosage? Because they're very expensive, almost $30 a pack. Maybe you could try folk remedies, herbs, infusions." Sometimes she did buy the cheapest substitutes, which barely helped and often had side effects. And sometimes she said there was no money, and I had to endure headaches and blood pressure spikes. But worse than the physical suffering was the moral humiliation. Every day I felt like a beggar in my own house, a man who was tolerated out of pity, given handouts, and expected to be grateful for them. Meanwhile, Isabel blossomed before my eyes. New furniture appeared in her room: a beautiful dressing table, an expensive armchair, a modern computer. Her closet filled with fashionable clothes. She even bought a used but decent car, a red Honda. "Where did you get the money for a car?" I couldn't hold back one day. I got a job, she replied casually. I work as a sales manager. I earn pretty well. But I saw that she worked at most 3 hours a day, and not every day. Her salary was symbolic, about $170 a month. Meanwhile, my pension kept coming into the account, and most of it vanished into thin air. One day I couldn't take it anymore and protested, Isabel, this is my pension. My money. I worked 40 years to earn this pension. She looked at me with such contempt that I shrank inside. Your money? And whose house is this? Who pays the utility bills? Who buys the groceries? I slave away here for you like a servant, running the whole house, and you dare make claims? Want me to leave? Fine. But I warn you, without me, you won't last a week. You'll end up in a nursing home immediately. I apologized at once and never raised the subject again. The fear of being left alone, helpless, was stronger than all other feelings. Several months passed under this new order. During that time, Isabel finally turned me from the master of the house into a dependent, and she did it systematically, methodically, gradually cutting down my rights and freedoms. First, she forbade me to use the phone without her permission. Miguel, she announced one day, I noticed the phone bills have gotten higher. Apparently, you're calling someone. From today on, any calls will go through me. You'll tell me who you want to call, and I'll dial the number. But it's my phone, I protested timidly. No, it's our phone, and we pay for it out of the household budget, so we'll use it by my rules. The phone was moved into her room. From then on, if I wanted to call anyone, I had to ask permission like a child. Naturally, I almost never used that right. It was too humiliating to explain each time why and to whom I wanted to call. Then it was the turn of the television in the living room. Isabel declared that she would decide what to watch. Miguel, your tastes are too peculiar, she said. All those old movies, history programs, I'm not interested in that. Let's compromise. In the morning and afternoon, we'll watch what I want, and in the evening, if there's nothing interesting, we'll put on something for you. There was always something interesting for her every evening. As a result, I was deprived even of that simple joy, watching the news or an old film. The next step was limiting my movement around the house. You know what, Miguel, Isabel said after I entered the kitchen while she was cooking. Let's set a simple rule. The kitchen is my workspace. When I'm cooking or cleaning there, you don't come in. You just get in the way underfoot. But I just wanted a drink of water. That's nothing serious. You can wait half an hour. Or ask me to bring you some water in your room. And so I was banished from the kitchen as well. Now I had to spend most of the day in my room, like in a prison cell. But the most painful restriction was the ban on meeting with neighbors. Isabel noticed that I sometimes spoke with Carlos in the entryway or in the yard. Miguel, she said sternly, I ask you to minimize contact with the neighbors. They're too nosy. They ask unnecessary questions. We don't need that. But Carlos is my old friend. No buts. Either you do as I say, or you find another place to live. The threat of eviction worked flawlessly. I started avoiding the neighbors, and if a meeting happened, I would mutter a few routine phrases and quickly leave. Gradually, I became a recluse in my own home. My only entertainment became the rare trips to the store to buy groceries with my beggarly $3. And even these trips Isabel tried to control. Where are you going? She would ask if she saw me dressing. To the store to buy bread. And do you have money? Yes, you gave me some this morning. Make sure you don't lose it, and don't buy anything extra. Just bread, that's all. As if I could afford anything extra with $3. At the store, I felt like the most miserable man in the world. I watched other customers put meat, fruit, sweets into their baskets, while I stood in front of the bread shelf, choosing the cheapest loaf. The shop assistants already knew me as the regular buyer of expired, discounted goods. Grandpa, one of them would say pityingly, maybe I can help you. We've got some good sausage today, on sale. Thank you, I would reply, just bread. And in her eyes, I could see pity for the strange old man who could afford nothing but bread. It was especially hard in winter. Isabel economized on heating. The heaters were set to the minimum. When I tried to turn up the heat, she immediately turned it down again. Miguel, the gas and electricity bills are already huge. Better put on warmer clothes. I walked around the house in 2 sweaters and thick socks, but I was still cold. In her room, though, it was warm. I could hear her personal heater working. By spring, I was already a pitiful sight. I had lost 15 kilos, became stooped, hardly left the house. The neighbors, when they occasionally saw me, looked at my changes with surprise. "Miguel," Carlos once said, "what's wrong with you? You look terrible. Maybe you should see a doctor." "Everything's fine," I answered automatically. "It's just age." "What age? You've aged 10 years in half a year." But I couldn't tell the truth. I was too afraid of the consequences. And meanwhile, Isabel's life kept getting better. She bought new furniture for the living room, replaced the old refrigerator with a modern double-door one. She went on trips, sometimes to visit a friend on the coast, sometimes to a spa center. She never took me along, of course, but I kept silent. I just wished she would leave sooner so I could relax a little. During her absences, I felt freer. I could turn on the TV when I wanted, go into the kitchen, drink water without permission. But the money was still never enough, not even for the bare necessities. So a year passed, 365 days of humiliation, hunger, and complete helplessness. I thought I would die like that, slowly in poverty and loneliness, forgotten by everyone except the one who had turned my life into hell. But sometimes fate turns in the most unexpected way. It happened on a rainy October day. Outside, a fine, nasty drizzle fell, the kind that seemed never-ending. I was sitting in my room wrapped in an old blanket. The heating hadn't yet been turned on, and the house was cold. I was reading an old book, one I had already reread 10 times. There was no money for new ones, of course. Isabel was planning to go away for the weekend, to visit a friend, as she said, but by then I no longer believed a single word from her. Most likely she was going to spend time with some man. Lately she had been paying far too much attention to her appearance and buying expensive cosmetics. "Miguel," she announced, entering my room in a new expensive coat, "I'm leaving until Monday. Behave quietly, don't open the door unnecessarily. There's some food in the fridge, it should be enough. And this," she threw a few crumpled bills onto the nightstand, $8 for 3 days. Be frugal. $8 for 3 days, less than $3 a day. Even by her stingy standards, it was mockery. But I stayed silent. The main thing was that she would leave quickly. After her departure, I felt the usual relief. The house became quieter, but also freer. I could walk through the rooms without fearing her contemptuous glance or another biting remark. Around noon, the doorbell rang. I grew wary. Isabel had strictly forbidden me from letting anyone in, but the bell rang insistently several times in a row. I went to the door and looked through the peephole. On the porch stood an elderly man in uniform. A postman. "Who's there?" I asked through the door. "Postal Service. A registered letter for Miguel Fernandez." A registered letter? Who could be sending me a registered letter? I hadn't written to anyone, hadn't corresponded with anyone. Could it be some official document? When I opened the door, I saw a short, gray-haired man of about 60 with a postman's bag slung over his shoulder. "Miguel Fernandez," he confirmed. "Yes, that's me. Registered letter, international. Please sign here." International? I was even more surprised. Why would I get an international letter? After signing, I took the envelope. It was thick, good quality, clearly expensive. The return address was printed in small letters, and I managed to make out only the word USA. Closing the door, I went to the kitchen and examined the envelope carefully. The sender's address, Rodriguez and Associates, Attorneys at Law, Miami, Florida, USA. Below, something else in fine print. Who were Rodriguez and Associates, and why were American lawyers writing to me? With hands trembling from excitement, I opened the envelope. Inside were several sheets of paper. One was in Spanish, the others in English. I picked up the Spanish one and began to read, "Dear Mr. Fernandez, this letter comes to you from the law firm Rodriguez and Associates in Miami, Florida, USA. We are handling the estate of your late brother, Ricardo Fernandez, who passed away on September 15, 2023, in our city at the age of 83. According to the will, drawn up by the deceased in 2020, you are his sole heir. The estate includes a residential home in suburban Miami valued at $300,000, cash in bank accounts totaling $300,000, securities and investment assets amounting to $70,000, works of art and antiques valued at $30,000. The total value of the inheritance amounts to $700,000. To accept the inheritance, your presence at our office is required, or you may provide a notarized power of attorney authorizing a representative to claim the estate on your behalf. The deadline for claiming the inheritance under the laws of the state of Florida is December 15th, 2024. Please contact us urgently to clarify the details of processing the inheritance. Respectfully, Dr. Jose Rodriguez, Attorney. At the bottom were the contact details of the law firm. I read the letter 3 times, unable to believe my eyes. Ricardo, my younger brother Ricardo, whom I had not seen in almost 60 years. It turned out he had been alive all these years, living in the United States, and had become a wealthy man. And now he had left me his entire estate. $700,000. For a man who had spent the last year living on $3 a day, that figure was utterly unreal. I couldn't even imagine such money. But the first joy quickly gave way to anxiety. December 15th, less than 2 months away, and I would need either to travel to the U.S., which was utterly impossible with my finances, or to issue a power of attorney to someone. And most important of all, how could I possibly keep this secret from Isabel? If Isabel found out about the inheritance, she would surely try to get a share. More likely, she would find a way to take it all for herself. I hid the letter inside an old book and tried to calm down. I needed to think everything through carefully. My memory began to bring back events from nearly 60 years ago. Ricardo was 4 years older than me. In 1965, he was just 22, fresh out of university, working as a translator. That year, he received a scholarship to study in the United States, a rare stroke of luck, since very few people were allowed to go abroad. And then the unthinkable happened. A letter came from Miami saying that Ricardo had decided to stay in the U.S. and was seeking political asylum. For our family, this was a catastrophe. At that time, a traitor, that's what they called those who didn't return home, was considered an enemy of the people. Security officers came to our house, interrogated the whole family. My father was even taken away for several days. We were forced to sign a paper renouncing Ricardo and declaring him dead to us. Any attempt to contact him could have ended in prison for the entire family, so we truly did forget him. No one in the family mentioned his name again. When our parents died, we didn't even put a word about the second son on their graves. I thought Ricardo had long been dead, but it turned out he had lived his whole life in the U.S., become wealthy, and until the very end remembered his brother, whom he hadn't seen in 60 years. Tears welled in my eyes. Ricardito, my little brother. He remembered me, loved me, and in the end saved me, even after his death. But now there was the practical question, how to accept this inheritance without Isabel finding out. For 2 days I suffered in silence, not knowing what to do. The letter from the U.S. lay hidden in the book, and several times a day I would take it out, reread it, and try to believe it was real. December 15th, the deadline loomed, and I didn't even know how to contact the American lawyers. My phone was the simplest kind, good only for local calls. I didn't have a computer. I had no money for international calls either. And then I remembered Carlos, my neighbor, my friend since youth. He was about 10 years younger than me, but after retirement, he had become quite interested in computers. He even bought a laptop, got internet access, and learned to use email. For a pensioner, that was rare. Of course, Isabel had forbidden me to speak with neighbors, but she wasn't home, and the risk was worth it. Maybe Carlos could at least help me contact the Americans? On Sunday morning, I gathered my courage and knocked on his door. "Miguel," he exclaimed joyfully, opening up. "What brings you here? Come in, come in. Haven't seen you properly in ages. How are you? How's your health?" I stepped into his house. Everything was as always, clean, cozy, the smell of coffee in the air. In the corner of the living room stood a computer desk with a laptop on it. "Carlos," I said, settling into a chair. I need your help. Very serious help. What happened? He asked, suddenly concerned. You don't look well, to be honest. You've lost a lot of weight. Is everything all right? I pulled the letter from my pocket and handed it to him. Read this. Carlos put on his glasses and began to read attentively. As he read, his eyebrows rose higher and his eyes widened. Miguel, he whispered when he finished, this is thousands of dollars. Do you understand the kind of money we're talking about? I do, more than $700,000. And your brother, you had a brother who emigrated back in the 60s? Yes, Ricardo. I thought he had died long ago, but it turns out he lived in the US and became rich. Carlos carefully studied the documents again, then shook his head. Incredible story. But tell me honestly, are you sure this isn't a scam? The internet is full of letters from Nigerian princes and dead millionaires who supposedly left someone an inheritance. I thought of that too, I admitted. That's why I came to you. Can you check online whether this law firm actually exists? Of course, let's check. We went over to the computer and Carlos began searching for information about the law firm Rodriguez and Associates. After half an hour, he found their official website. Look, Carlos said, pointing at the screen. The firm exists, the address matches. Here's Dr. Jose Rodriguez, his photo, his biography. Everything looks serious and solid. Then we found the law firm's email address, and Carlos helped me draft a letter. In it, I confirmed receipt of the inheritance notice and asked whether it was possible to complete the procedures through a representative in my country. The reply came the very next day. Dr. Rodriguez explained the procedure in detail. The inheritance could be accepted through a notarized power of attorney, but it had to be apostilled, a special international certification of the document. In addition, the letter included copies of documents, Ricardo's death certificate, his will, and appraisals of the property. Reading the will, I couldn't hold back my tears. Ricardo had written, I bequeath all my property to my only brother, Miguel Fernandez, who lives in our homeland. I hope this money will help him spend the rest of his life in comfort and peace, surrounded by care and respect. Forgive me, Miguel, for not contacting you all these years. I was afraid of causing you problems during the dictatorship, but I always remembered you, loved you, and was proud of you. To me, you were not only an older brother, but also an example of decency and humanity. With this money, I try, at least partially, to make amends for my departure and for all the years we were apart. Take care of yourself, little brother. Carlos, I said through tears, help me. I can't do this alone. Of course I'll help, he said. But what about Isabel? She'll have to know about such an inheritance, won't she? I told him everything. About the card, the $3 a day, the humiliation, and the hunger. Carlos listened, his face growing darker and darker. Miguel, he said when I finished, this is abuse. How could you put up with it for so long? What could I do? Where could I go? Who could I complain to? You should have come to me earlier, or to the other neighbors. We would have figured something out. She threatened me with a nursing home. Nonsense, they wouldn't have sent you there just like that. It was pure bluff. But there was no point in regretting the past. The important thing now was to complete the inheritance paperwork before December 15. Carlos took on the role of my helper and representative. We decided to issue the power of attorney in his name. He knew languages, could use the internet, and could communicate with the American lawyers. The next few days we spent gathering documents and finding a notary who could prepare a power of attorney with an apostille. The service wasn't cheap, $200. Miguel, Carlos said, I'll lend you the money. You'll pay me back from the inheritance. I was infinitely grateful to him. Without his help, I would never have managed this task. But one problem remained. Somehow I needed to get my passport back from Isabel in order to go to the notary. Isabel returned Monday evening, tanned and cheerful. Clearly, she had enjoyed herself. She hardly noticed me at all, went into her room, changed clothes, had dinner, and sat down to watch television. I waited for the right moment to ask for the passport. I needed a convincing excuse. The next day at breakfast, I gathered my courage. Isabel, I need to go to the clinic. I haven't seen a doctor in a long time, and my blood pressure is getting worse. What doctor? She asked suspiciously. What exactly hurts? The general practitioner first. Let him take a look and give me referrals. And do you have money for the doctor? Or will you come begging me again? I have it, I lied. I've saved a little. She gave me a distrustful look, but finally pulled my passport from the document folder. Just don't lose it and bring it back quickly. Honestly, what's the point of a doctor? At your age, nothing will help anyway. Waste of money. I just want to check my blood pressure, maybe adjust my medication. All right, but if you waste money on useless tests, don't expect any more help from me. The next morning, after receiving my $3, I went not to the clinic, but to the notary. Carlos was already waiting there with the prepared documents and the money. The notary, a stern woman of about 50, carefully examined all the documents from the U.S. She had many questions. Miguel, the notary said, "Do you understand that this concerns an inheritance worth thousands of dollars? That's a very large sum. Are you sure you want to issue the power of attorney to Mr. Moreno?" "Absolutely sure," I replied. "He is an old friend. I trust him completely." "And you understand all the legal consequences? With this power of attorney, Mr. Moreno will be able to accept the inheritance on your behalf and manage your money?" "I understand. I need a helper. At my age, I can't handle such complex procedures alone." The process took 2 hours. The notary prepared the power of attorney in Spanish and English, certified it, and put on all the necessary stamps. Then we went to another office to obtain the apostille, the special seal that makes the document valid abroad. By evening, the documents were ready. Carlos immediately scanned them and sent them to the U.S. Dr. Rodriguez confirmed receipt and informed us that the inheritance process would take about a month. I returned home by dinner, exhausted but happy. The hardest part was behind me. "Well, Grandpa," Isabel greeted me, "how was the clinic?" "I made an appointment with the general practitioner for next week," I lied, handing back the passport. "And how much money did you waste?" $15 for the appointment. You see? I told you. Throwing money away. At your age, going to doctors is pointless." I stayed silent. Just a little longer, and everything would change completely. The next month was a time of agonizing waiting. Outwardly, life went on as before. The same $3 a day, the same hunger, the same humiliations. But inside, I was a completely different man. I knew that soon everything would change. Carlos regularly communicated with the American lawyers, translated documents, sent additional certificates. The process moved slowly but surely. Every week, Dr. Rodriguez sent reports about the progress of the case. Meanwhile, life with Isabel grew even worse. It was as if she sensed something had changed in me, and she began pressing even harder. "Miguel," she said one evening at dinner, "I've noticed you've been acting strange lately, smiling for no reason, staring out the window for a long time. Are you sure you're not unwell?" "No, I'm fine," I replied, "because if your mind starts failing, we'll have to see a psychiatrist. And a psychiatrist might declare you incompetent, and then it's straight to the nursing home." That threat still frightened me, though I already knew that soon it would lose all meaning. The hardest time was before New Year's. The whole city was preparing for the holiday. Shops full of gifts, fruit, champagne, and I couldn't afford even an extra piece of bread. Isabel organized a New Year's party. Her friends came with their men, bringing expensive food and alcohol. They celebrated in the living room, while I was ordered to stay in my room and not get in the way. "Grandpa," Isabel said, peeking into my room around 10 at night, "don't you dare come out. We have an adult company, nothing for you there." But around midnight, I went out to the toilet. On the kitchen table were the remains of the feast: shrimp, fish, fancy salads, fruit, candies. My mouth watered just from the sight. "Oh, here's our grandpa," one of Isabel's friends said loudly when she noticed me. "Isabel, what does your grandpa eat? Maybe give him something from our table?" "No, no," Isabel quickly replied. "He's on a diet. The doctor forbade fatty and salty food. It's harmful for him." "What a pity," another guest said. "On New Year's, everyone should eat shrimp." And they laughed. Red with shame, I hurried to the toilet and then back to my room. That New Year's night, I lay on my bed, listening to the drunken voices and laughter from the living room, and thought that this was the last New Year I would spend as a beggar. The next New Year would be completely different. And in mid-January, the long-awaited news finally arrived. Carlos came to me when Isabel was not at home, his face glowing. "Miguel," he said, "congratulations. The inheritance is finalized. All documents are in order. The money is being transferred to an account in a local bank." I couldn't believe it. Could it really be true? Could the nightmare finally be over? "How much is it in total?" I asked in a trembling voice. "Taking into account the exchange rate and all commissions?" "About $700,000. For a man who had lived on $3 a day for a year, that sum was overwhelming, unreal, fantastic. "What should I do now?" I asked. "First, you need to open a bank account to receive the funds. Then you decide yourself what to do about Isabel." Opening the bank account took a few days. When the bank staff saw the amount of the upcoming transfer, their attitude toward me changed instantly. I turned from an ordinary pensioner into a VIP client. They offered me a personal manager, special service terms, and investment consultations. "Miguel," said the bank manager, an elegant woman of about 40, "with such a sum, you must act very carefully. We can offer different options for placing your funds." But I made no decisions yet. First, I had to deal with the main problem: Isabel. I thought through the plan for several days. Of course, I wanted simply to throw Isabel out of the house, to tell her everything I thought about her behavior over the past year. But that wouldn't have been right. She was still my son's widow, and for the first months of our life together, I did owe her some gratitude. Besides, turning someone out on the street, even a bad person, was against my principles. I needed to act fairly, firmly, but not cruelly. One day in February, when the money had already been transferred to my account and the bank card granting access to it lay in my pocket, I resolved to have the talk. That morning, after receiving my usual $3, the last ones in my life, I said to Isabel, "We need to have a serious talk." "About what?" she asked, not looking up from her phone, where she was playing some game. "About our future. Please, sit down." Something in my tone made her wary. She put aside the phone and sat across from me at the kitchen table. "What's going on, Miguel?" "Tell me honestly," I began calmly. "Are you satisfied with your life, with the way it has turned out?" "What does my life have to do with this? What are you talking about?" "I mean that you are 48 years old. You are still young, attractive. You have many years ahead of you. Should you really spend them taking care of an old man?" Isabel frowned. "Miguel, what are you getting at?" "I'm saying it's time for us to part ways. You need to build your own life, and I need to make some important decisions about my future." "What decisions?" Her voice hardened. "And what do you mean by part ways?" "It means you need to find another place to live and move out, and I will live alone." Isabel jumped up. "Are you out of your mind? Where am I supposed to go? I don't have money for rent, and besides, who will take care of you? You're helpless." "I'll be fine. As for money, I will help you with moving and settling in a new place." "Help me," she laughed bitterly. "With what? With your $3 a day?" "Not with $3. I'll give you $10,000. That will be enough to start." Isabel froze, her mouth open. "What? 10,000? Where did you get $10,000? "That's not important. What matters is that tomorrow you begin looking for a place, and within a week you move out." "You're mocking me," she screamed. "What 30,000? Where did you get it? Did you steal something? Sell something?" "I stole nothing and sold nothing. The money was received legally. That is all you need to know." "No, that's not enough. I have the right to know. I'm practically your wife. I've been taking care of you." "You are not my wife," I said firmly. "You are my son's widow, and you have no right to my money." Isabel turned pale, then red. She realized she was losing control of the situation. "Miguel," she said, switching to a pleading tone, "what are you saying? We've lived together for so many years. I've looked after you." "Looked after me," I repeated. "You call it care when you kept me half-starved for a whole year. When you humiliated me every day. When you took my pension without my knowledge. But I did it for your own good. I paid for the house. I bought food. With my money, with my pension. And where did the other $400 go every month? On your clothes? Your car? Your entertainment?" Isabel realized there was no point in denying it. "But I have a right to live," she exclaimed. "I'm a young woman. I need to arrange my life somehow." "Of course you do, just not at my expense. That's why I advise you to start a new life, apart from me." The conversation went on for 2 more hours. Isabel tried to threaten me, then humbly begged, then threatened again. She mentioned the nursing home, my helplessness, that I wouldn't last a week without her, but I remained firm. In the end, she understood that arguing was useless. "All right," she said with hatred in her voice, "but first I want to see this money of yours. For all I know, you could be making empty promises." I took out the bank statement and placed it on the table. Isabel read it, and her face turned deathly pale. $700,000, she whispered. "From where?" "That's not important. What's important is that I keep my word. You'll get $30,000 once you move out." "Only $30,000? And the rest of the money?" "The rest is mine, and mine alone." "But I was with you. I took care of you. I have the right to a share." "You have no rights. 30,000 is more than you deserve. I suggest you accept it." Isabel bargained for a long time, trying to squeeze out more. She demanded 100,000, then 50. But I stood firm. 30,000, no more. Isabel moved out 4 days later. She found a rented 2-room apartment in a good neighborhood, bought new furniture, and took all her belongings with her. I kept my promise. I transferred $10,000 to her card. "Remember this, Miguel," she said at the door with her suitcase. "Without me, you'll be lost. Within a month, you'll be begging me to come back." "We'll see," I replied calmly. When the door closed behind her, I felt a relief I hadn't experienced in many years. The silence in the house was not oppressive, but healing. For the first time in a year, I could walk freely through my own home without fear of a contemptuous glance or a cruel remark. The first thing I did was go to a fine grocery store, and for the first time in many years, I didn't count my money. I bought everything I wanted: good meat, beautiful fish, expensive cheeses, delicacies, fruit, sweets. The shop assistants looked in surprise at the old man buying hundreds of dollars worth of food. At home, I cooked myself a real meal: a beef steak, a fresh vegetable salad, a fine bottle of wine. I ate slowly, savoring every bite. After a year of hunger, it was a true feast. Then I began to put the house in order. I threw away everything that reminded me of Isabel and those years of humiliation. I bought new furniture, modern appliances, ordered renovations in my room. But most important, I felt like a person again. Not a beggar, not an old man begging for alms, but a full human being with the right to a dignified life. Of course, the neighbors were surprised by the changes. Carlos knew the truth and sincerely rejoiced for me. To the rest, I told a story about an insurance payout I had received after my son's accident. The explanation was plausible and no one asked more questions. I hired a housekeeper, a pleasant woman of about 50 who came 3 times a week to clean and cook. I no longer had to eat bread with water or save on medicine. I found new hobbies and interests. I bought good books, subscribed to my favorite magazines. I got a modern television and watched the films I wanted. I started going to the theater and concerts for the first time in many years. But most importantly, I made peace with myself. I no longer felt like a burden or a man left behind. At 83, fate had given me a second chance at a dignified life. 6 months after receiving the inheritance, I made a decision that once had seemed impossible: to travel to the United States. I wanted to see with my own eyes how my brother had lived, to visit his grave, to thank the people who had helped me with the inheritance. It was my first trip abroad at the age of 83. Before, such a thing was unthinkable. No money, no health, no documents. But now everything was different. Carlos helped me obtain a passport and an American visa. At the bank, I was given a foreign currency card with a comfortable balance. I bought travel clothes, a new suitcase, and the medicines I would need for the trip. The flight to Miami took 8 hours. I flew business class. For the first time in my life, the flight attendants looked after the elderly passenger with care, offering extra pillows, warm blankets, delicacies. At the Miami airport, I was met by a representative of the law firm. a young man of about 30. He drove me to a hotel, an expensive one, with a view of the ocean and the promenade. The next day I met Dr. Rodriguez. He was an elegant, middle-aged man with graying temples and kind eyes. He welcomed me warmly in his office. "Senor Fernandez," he said, "I'm glad to finally meet you in person. Your brother spoke of you often." "He did." "You knew him personally?" "Of course, Ricardo was not only my client, but also my friend. A very honorable, kind man. He often spoke of his homeland, of his family, of his childhood. Most of all, he remembered his older brother Miguel." Dr. Rodriguez told me about the last years of Ricardo's life. It turned out my brother had been quite a well-known figure in Miami, a successful businessman, philanthropist, and patron of the arts. He imported Latin American coffee, owned several cafes, and donated generously to charity. Ricardo was deeply troubled by the break with his family, the lawyer said. He understood that during the dictatorship, any attempt to contact you could have caused you serious problems, so he waited for change in your country. And why didn't he reach out after the regime fell? He was afraid you wouldn't forgive him, and he didn't know if you were alive, where you were. At that time, your country was in such turmoil. He tried several times to find you through different agencies, but without success. And yet he never forgot me. Never. In his last years, he often said his life's main purpose was to help his brother, if he was still alive. That's why he wrote his will the way he did. Dr. Rodriguez showed me photographs of Ricardo from different years. In one, an older man with a kind face, very much like our father. In another, a young man exactly as I remembered him. "May I keep one of these photos?" I asked. "Of course, take whichever you like." Later, we went to the house where Ricardo had lived. It was a small but very cozy two-story home in the Miami suburbs, not far from the bay. The house had already been sold under the will, but the new owners allowed me to look inside. Around the house was a small garden with tropical plants. The view of the bay and the city was breathtaking. Here my brother had spent most of his life. Here he thought of me. Here he wrote the will that changed my destiny. "Did he live alone?" I asked Dr. Rodriguez. "Yes, Ricardo was never married. He said the only family he needed was back in his homeland." At the local cemetery, we found Ricardo's grave. The tombstone was simple, without excess, exactly the kind a modest man would choose. The inscription was in two languages, English and Spanish. Ricardo Fernandez, 1940 to 2023, remembered his homeland until his last day. I stood a long time at the grave of the brother I had not seen for 60 years. In my hands, I held a bouquet of tropical flowers, the same kind that grew in his garden. "Thank you, Ricardito," I whispered. "Thank you for not forgetting. Thank you for giving me back my dignity. Forgive me for never seeing you again in life." Dr. Rodriguez tactfully stepped aside, giving me the chance to be alone with my brother's memory. I spent a week in Miami, stayed in a fine hotel, went on excursions, got to know the city where Ricardo had lived his life. It was not just a journey to another country, but into the life of a brother I had never known. The staff of the law firm told me different stories about Ricardo, how he had helped poor immigrants from our country, how he took part in charitable projects, how every year on my birthday he lit a candle in a Catholic church in Miami. "Your brother was a very religious man," Dr. Rodriguez said. "Despite his many years in the U.S., he kept his Catholic faith. He said it was the one thing that still tied him to his homeland." Before leaving, I visited the Catholic church where Ricardo had prayed. I lit candles for the repose of his soul and for my own health. I asked God to forgive us both, him for emigrating and me for never trying to find my brother after the regime had fallen. After returning from the U.S., I felt that I had finally found inner peace. Now I knew that Ricardo had lived a worthy life, that he had not forgotten his family, and that in the end, he had helped me. The circle was complete, but life, as always, had new surprises in store. A month after my return, I met Isabel on the street. It was unexpected and unpleasant. She had changed a lot. She looked older, thinner, worn out. The expensive clothes she had worn a year earlier were replaced by simple, cheap ones. "Miguel," she called to me as I was passing by a bus stop. I stopped, though I very much wished I hadn't. "Hello, Isabel. How are you?" "How's your health?" she asked, and there was a note of hope in her voice. Everything is fine, thank you. As for me, she hesitated. Things are not so good. The 30,000 is gone. I had to spend it on treatment. They found a serious illness. I looked at her more closely. She truly did look sick. Yellowish skin, lifeless eyes, trembling hands. What is it? Liver cancer, she said quietly. Stage 4. The doctors say I have 3 months left, 6 at most. I felt a stab of pity. No matter how bad she had been, dying of cancer is a terrible fate. I'm very sorry, I said sincerely. Miguel, she continued, and now her voice was full of pleading. Maybe we could make peace? I know I behaved badly, but I have nowhere to go, no one to turn to. She wanted to come back. She wanted me to take her in again, so she could die in comfort, on my money. I looked at this woman who had tormented me for a year, humiliated me, kept me on the brink of starvation, who had stolen my pension, who had turned me into a beggar in my own home. And now she was asking for help. Christian morality demanded I forgive the enemy, help a dying person. But human justice said otherwise. No, Isabel, I said firmly, that life is over, forever. But I'm sick, I have nowhere to live, I have no money for treatment. You have the apartment you rent, you have social services. They help the sick. Turn to them. Miguel, how can you be like this? We lived together for so many years. Are you really so cruel? I'm not cruel. I'm fair. A year ago, when I begged you for $2 extra for medicine, what did you answer? That an old man doesn't need more. Now live by that principle yourself. But I repent. I understand I was wrong. Repentance is good, but it doesn't cancel the consequences of your actions. I turned and walked away. Isabel shouted something after me, but I didn't look back. At home, I thought for a long time about that meeting. Had I done the right thing? Had I been too harsh on a dying woman? But then I remembered the year of hell she had put me through. I remembered eating stale bread while she bought expensive dresses with my pension. I remembered how she called me grandpa and handed me $3 like a handout. No, I had done the right thing. Justice does not always coincide with mercy, and everyone must answer for their actions. Another year passed. I turned 84, but I felt better than I had at 82 when I lived with Isabel. Good food, quality medicine, and freedom from stress had done their work. I found new acquaintances, mostly elderly but intelligent people with whom it was a pleasure to talk. We met in cafes, went to the theater, discussed books and films. I began doing charity work, following my brother's example. I helped an orphanage, a nursing home. Ironically, I myself never ended up there. And hospitals. Ricardo's money was working for good causes. What I especially loved was helping lonely pensioners. I knew from my own experience how hard it was to be old and helpless. Through social services, I found such people and helped them anonymously, paid for treatment, bought groceries, sometimes just gave money. One day, my upstairs neighbor Marina, a woman in her 70s, came to me. Her story was similar to mine. Her son had died, her daughter-in-law threw her out of the house, and she lived on a meager pension. Miguel, she said, I'm sorry to bother you, but I'm in real trouble. My medicine has run out and I have no money. My pension doesn't come for another week. I gave her money for medicine, and then I thought, how many other Marinas live around me? How many old people suffer from poverty and loneliness? That's how I found my new mission. I became a secret benefactor of lonely pensioners in our neighborhood. Through the housing office, through the local policeman, through neighbors, I found out who needed help, and I helped. Without showing myself, without boasting, I just did good. Carlos became my main assistant in these matters. He found those in need, arranged deliveries of food and medicine, and made sure the help reached the right hands. Miguel, he once told me, do you know how many people live with dignity now thanks to you? Not thanks to me, thanks to Ricardo. It's his money doing good. But you're the one managing it, and you're doing it wisely. I received letters from people I had helped. They didn't know my name, but they wrote words of gratitude to their anonymous benefactor. Those letters warmed my soul more than all the riches in the world. I also began writing memoirs. I told the story of my life, of Ricardo, of our generation. I wanted to leave behind a testimony of the times we had lived through. I didn't write for publication, only for myself, for memory. But it was turning into quite an interesting document of an era. One spring day when I was already 85, sad news came. Isabel had died. I learned about it by chance. I met one of her former friends on the street. "Did you know," she said, "Isabel passed away last week in the oncology hospital." I felt sorrow but not remorse. Everyone walks their own path. She had chosen greed and cruelty. She received loneliness and suffering. I had chosen patience and later, justice. And I was rewarded. I did not go to her funeral, not out of malice, but because I did not want to pretend. But at home I lit a candle for the repose of her soul. After all, she had been my son's widow. And a month later, something happened that finally convinced me that life is just. A young man of about 30 came to see me, tall, handsome, with kind eyes. "Miguel Fernandez?" he asked. "Well, yes, that's me." "My name is Ricardo Fernandez. I am your grandson." I couldn't believe my ears. A grandson? But Andres and Isabel had no children. "Forgive me, but you must have the wrong address." "No, I didn't. I am the son of Andres Fernandez, but not from Isabel, from another woman. My mother raised me, I had her last name, but recently I learned the truth about my father. She told me her story. It turned out that before marrying Isabel, Andres had been seeing another young woman, Carolina. She became pregnant, but Andres wasn't ready for family life back then. Carolina moved to another city, gave birth to a son, gave him her surname, and raised him alone. Ricardo grew up, graduated from university, became a programmer, and only recently before her death, Carolina told him the truth about his father. She gave him photos, documents, and address. "I doubted for a long time whether to come to you," he said, "but I decided I had the right to know my family." I looked at him and saw the features of Andres in his youth, the same shape of the eyes, the same smile, the same gestures. This really was my grandson. "And why are you named Ricardo?" I asked. "Mom said that my father wanted to name me after his uncle, whom he loved very much." I burst into tears. Ricardo. It was as if my brother had returned to me in the face of my grandson. The circle had closed in the most astonishing way. Ricardo turned out to be a wonderful young man, intelligent, kind, decent. He worked at an IT company, was married, and was raising a little daughter. "You have a great-granddaughter," he said, showing me a photo. "Valentina, she's 3 years old." I looked at the picture of a dark-haired girl with enormous eyes and understood. Life goes on. Our family line would not be broken. We began meeting regularly. Ricardo brought his wife and daughter to see me, and we spent weekends together. I told him about his father, about our family's history, about his great-uncle Ricardo from the US, and I made an important decision about the inheritance. Ricardo was my only blood relative, and it was he who should one day receive my brother's money. But not immediately. The young man first had to mature, to understand the value of money and the responsibility it carries. For now, I continued doing charity, helping the needy, living a dignified life, and every day I thank fate for proving to be just. Now I am 86. My health, of course, is not what it once was, but life is still good. I have money for proper medicine, for doctors, for everything I need. I have people who love and respect me. I have a purpose. Every day I think about that incredible twist of fate that changed my life. The letter from the US came at the most critical moment, when I had nearly lost hope, when I thought I would die in poverty and humiliation. But my brother, whom I hadn't seen in 60 years, reached out a hand from the past. He didn't just leave me money, he restored my human dignity, gave me the chance to live the rest of my life with my head held high. Sometimes I think of Isabel. Do I pity her? On a human level, yes. No one deserves to die of cancer alone. But morally, her fate was just. She chose greed and cruelty and received what she deserved. I chose patience and later fair firmness. And I was rewarded not only with money, but with the gift of family, a grandson and a great-granddaughter. In my bedroom hangs a photograph of Ricardo, the one given to me in the US. A gray-haired man with kind eyes, my younger brother, who became my savior. Every day I say thank you to him for the gift he gave me. Not for the money, but for the chance to remain a human being. Next to it stands a photo of my great-granddaughter Valentina, a dark-haired girl with enormous eyes in which I see the future of our family. She will live in a different world, one without the cruelty I had to endure. My story is proof that justice does exist in this world. Sometimes it comes late, sometimes in the most unexpected way, but it always comes to those who deserve it. The most important thing is not to give up, to preserve human dignity even in the hardest circumstances, and to believe that good will eventually triumph over evil. Because that is how it happens. Always. Miguel Fernandez finished his memoirs at the age of 87. He lived another 3 years, surrounded by the care of his grandson and his family. Most of his brother's inheritance he spent on charity, helping hundreds of lonely pensioners. The remainder passed to his grandson Ricardo, who continued his grandfather's charitable work. This story is living proof that even in the most hopeless situations, one must keep faith in justice. Life is unpredictable, and sometimes salvation comes from where you least expect it.